Okay, good evening. We are ready to get started. It's 8:40. We are learning tonight Maseches Pesachim Daf Yud Ches. Yesterday, and a full continuation of today, is going to be analyzing a brisa that we saw on Daf Tes Zayin Amud Aleph at the top of the page. I'll do a brief screen share now, just so you can get the flow of the brisa instead of needing to flip back. This brisa, as mentioned, is quoted from Pesachim Tes Zayin, and there, in that sugya, we were discussing a seemingly three-way machlokes in the Tanoim about whether or not liquids can cause tuma to other items. We saw three shitas. Number one, if you look to the end of number one, it says letame acherim, to make other things tahor, to make other things tame. So that's tahor divi Reb Meir. And Rabbi Lazar seemed to agree, though yesterday we discussed that that was complicated because Rabbi Lazar contradicted himself. The second shita that we saw, and that's going to be our beginning for tonight, is Rabbi Yehuda, who says, L'kol tameh, everything is going to be tameh, namely that mashkin, yes, they are fully capable of giving over tuma, unlike Reb Meir, who says that they don't give over tuma at all. And then the third shita is really a blend, it's a mix. Rabbi Yossi, Reb Shimon, this is number three. They say la'ochlin tmein, that a mashkin, a liquid, can make food tameh, but they can't transfer their tuma to a kli. These are the three shitas, and we're going to be starting with the shita of Rabbi Yehuda, because yesterday we discussed at the middle of Yud Zayin Amud Beis, we discussed the shita of Rabbi Yehuda, and then we said some key words that Rabbi Yehuda was chozer bo. The Rabbi Yehuda retracted his own shita. So we'll come back to the screen share in a minute, but let's just start with the Gemara to get some of the major brush strokes of the Gemara's question, and then we'll come back to the handout. It says the Gemara 6 lines from the bottom, 5 lines from the bottom on Yud Zayin Amud Beis. Iboya lehu. When Rav Yehuda retracted his shita, Rav Yehuda said that mashkin liquids can make everything tameh, but when he was chozer bo from that shita, how far was he chozer? How far away from his initial shita did he go? He said everything would become tameh from a liquid. When he retracted, was it mikalim hu dahadarbe? Was it that he only retracted his opinion about kalim, that really only kalim don't become tameh, but everything else does become tameh? Aval the ochlin, but when it comes to food, it's kirib Yossi v'Reb Shimon Svirale. He holds like the third shita that we saw. Odilma legamre hadarbe kirib Meir. So now, hopefully, this picture makes a little bit more sense. If you see the box right here to the left of the Shita, when Rabbi Yehuda retracted his opinion, who does he now agree with? Does he say that I'm only taking away from my opinion that everything becomes tameh? I'm only taking away kalim. Kalim don't become tameh. That's here. L'kalim tahorin, but la'ochlin tmein. Am I backtracking to be not the third opinion in the Mishnah, because I retract? I'm really like Rabbi Yossi, and Rav Meir, or no? Am I really now like number one, that when I retracted and said that it's no longer l'kol tameh, that really I go all the way back to the basic sheet of Rav Meir, that there is no capacity of a liquid to give tuma to others? That is the Gemara's question. Does his retraction make him more like Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Shimon, or does it make him more like Rav Meir? So let's continue. Let's see, the Gemara is going to bring an answer from a Mishnah in Maseches Para. Amar Rav Nachman, I think I might have an answer for you, says Rav Nachman. Amar Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak Tashma. The Mishnah in Para reads as follows: Para, a regular cow, not a para aduma, sheshasa mechatas, who drank the mechatas. He drank the water that is metaher tmeim and is metame tahorim. Right, the magical mechatas. It's a chok d'oraisa that it is able to make anybody tahor. But if you're tahor, it'll make you tameh. So if this para is otherwise tahor and it drinks the mechatas, so then says the Tanakama, para sheshasa mechatas bisara tameh. We see that the liquid will make this animal tameh. This is right in line with what we were talking about, that liquids potentially have the capacity to generate tuma. But remember who we're asking about. We were asking about Rabbi Yehuda, and he's the second shita here in this Mishnah. Last few words on the page at Zayin Amud Beis. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, he says, as we turn to the top of Yud Ches Amud Aleph, bitzlu b'me'eha. He says that the mechatas, when it's ingested by this cow, again, a regular cow, not the para aduma, when it's ingested by this cow, it's bitzlu b'me'eha, it gets nullified. Now, The Mishnah is over. Now the Gemara is going to ask a question that will try to indicate to us how Rabbi Yehuda's retraction worked. The Isal Kadaita, if you want to say that it's Mikelim Huda Hadarbe, that when he retracted, he was only retracting the capacity of liquids to make kalim, Mikelim Huda Hadarbe, Aval, the Ochlan Rabbi Yossi Reb Shimon Svirale. If his retraction puts him in the camp of Rabbi Yossi and Reb Shimon, then Amai bitlu b'me'eha legamre. Then why would you say that there's no tuma at all? Nihi, I'll grant you the tuma chamura lo mitamu. I'll grant you that there isn't going to be tuma chamura, which the Rishonim define as tuma that has the capacity not only to make something tame, but that thing can then make something else tame. So I'll grant you that it wouldn't be tuma chamura, but tuma kala mihu nitmu. At the very least, there should be some tuma. And by virtue of the fact that he says bitlu b'me'eha, the Rabbi Yehuda says it's totally batel, it implies that he holds like Rav Meir that there's no tuma whatsoever. Otherwise, he should have made the distinction that there is some tuma here, and then he would have been in the camp of Rav Yossi and Rav Shimon. So the Gemara infers from the very black and white sheet of Rabbi Yehuda here, bitlu b'me'eha, that when a cow drinks the mechatas, that there's no tuma at all, he must therefore be in the camp of Rav Meir. Says the Gemara 5 lines down, incorrect. My bitlu b'me'eha, what did Rabbi Yehuda mean in this Mishnah when he said that drinking the mechatas becomes nullified in the animal stomach, that it has no impact? It meant, like you recommended, nami bitlu mituma chamura. Yes, it does not make this animal tame in a way where the animal now makes others tame. However, aval tuma kala mitamo. However, yes, it does make the animal tame itself. Namely, with this explanation of Rabbi Yehuda in the Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda is now in the camp of Rav Yossi and Rav Shimon in the blended shita, where he says that yes, a liquid has the capacity to make other foods tame, but no, it does not have the capacity to make other kalim tame. So says the Gemara, fine, you've given an answer, but that causes for a pretty big problem. What's the problem? The problem is that if Rabbi Yehuda, the way you just explained Rabbi Yehuda, if really he's in the camp of Rav Yossi and Rav Shimon, and really when he said bitlu me'eleha, b'me'eha, that when the animal ingests the mechatas, that there still is a status of tuma on that animal, even though it's not tuma chamura. The animal can't make others tame. But then Michlal says, the Gemara 7th line, Yud Ches Amud Aleph, the Tanakama savar tuma chamura nami mitamo. It implies, just by contrast, it implies that the Tanakama must have held a different shita. What kind of machlokes is there where the Tanakama and Rabbi Yehuda hold the same thing? The way that you just explained, the shita of Rabbi Yehuda is that there was tuma kala. Look back at the first shita of the Tanakama. Parasha shasa mechatas b'sara tame. So, but then we're stuck because now the Tanakama and Rabbi Yehuda seem to be holding the same thing. Ha b'sara tamek tani. It doesn't say b'sara mitame, that when this animal becomes tame, it makes others animals tame tuma chamura, but rather it's just tame itself, tuma kala. So the way that we've tried to explain the shita of Rabbi Yehuda within this Mishnah makes it a difficulty within the Mishnah itself, because now it seems like he and the Tanakama hold exactly the same thing. So therefore, says the Gemara, great question, and therefore we're going to totally rewire this Mishnah in Maseches Para. Really, says the Gemara, Kula Rabbi Yehuda hi. The whole Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda. There is no Tanakama in our Mishnah. The Chasure Mechzera, there are words that are missing from the Mishnah in Maseches Para. V'hachik tani. And here is the appropriate text, and also we will see by implication an answer to our question of how Rabbi Yehuda's retraction went. Was it like Rav Meir, or was it like Rabbi Yossi and Rav Shimon? Says the Gemara, v'hachik tani. Here is the new language for the Mishnah in Maseches Para. Para sheshasa samechatas b'sara tame. An animal, a cow, not a special animal, just a regular cow that drinks the mechatas, the animal is tame. What is the category here? What are we talking about? Says the Gemara, it's talking about tuma kala, only talking about it itself becoming tame, but not tuma chamura, tuma chamura lo, not enough for the animal to then give the tuma to others. Why? Rabbi Yehuda Omer bitlu b'me'eha. There was a reduction of the power of the mechatas once it was ingested, and therefore close out this new language of our Mishnah and Para. The Chasuri Mechzer v'hachik tani is over. Now we have an explanation of our Mishnah that doesn't have a machlokas between the Tanakam and Rabbi Yehuda at all. It's all Rabbi Yehuda. What does that imply? It implies that Rabbi Yehuda holds of the opinion of Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Shimon. How so? Because he agrees with the Bamed Dvarim Amurim that we're not talking about a Tuma Chamur, but there is a Tuma Kala. So that is the sheet of Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Shimon. And the Gemara answers our question. You want to know when Rabbi Yehuda did his retraction, when he said he no longer holds of his initial opinion, does he go all the way back to the most lenient shita of Rav Meir that there's no Tuma ever, that Mashkin can never give Tuma to anything, they lack the capacity of giving Tuma? Or are they like Reb Shimon, Reb Yossi, like the blended shita, that some things are tameh, foods, and some things are not tameh, such as kalim? And the Gemara recommends that based on the rewiring of the language in the Mishnah, Maseches Para, that he therefore holds like Reb Yossi and Reb Shimon. Rav Ashi, however, gives a different answer. Rav Ashi says you can't bring a proof from here at all. Why not? Because Rav Ashi Amar Le'olam Bitlu B'me'eha Legamri. This is not a question of Tuma Kala. It's not a question of Tuma Chamura. Here we're dealing with something different. What we're dealing with is the fact that when you put something in your stomach, it gets destroyed. It doesn't have any capacity to give any tuma, even though it is what it is, even though it's mechatas. It doesn't make a difference. Bitlu v'me'eha legamre mishum dehavale mashkes ruach. Now it's just it's all chewed up. We have our parlance for it now. We have acid on our stomach. It breaks down the food. It's a nothing. It's a nothing. It has no capacity to give tuma. Not because he holds like Rav Meir, but because the mechatas, when it's ingested, becomes somewhat digested, and therefore it lacks the capacity to give over any tuma. So this is how he answers the question. And with that, we have a close of this part of the sugya. And in effect, we have two answers. We have answer number one, which seems to imply that he holds like Reb Yossi and Reb Shimon, because there, with that explanation, the rewiring of the Mishnah and Para, it says that there was some tuma, at least tuma kala, and that's very similar to Reb Yossi and Reb Shimon. And the second approach that was presented by Rav Ashi is that you can't even ask the question, because the ingestion of anything into your stomach, it degrades it so quickly, especially a liquid, to the point that it's indiscernible and therefore not impactful at all. That is sugya number one for tonight. Sugya number two, we're 1/3 of the way down in Yud Ches Amud Aleph, and now we're going to be spending time focusing on the third opinion in the Brisa, which is that of Rav Yossi. Now, we were just speaking about it in regards to how it compares to Rav Yehuda, but let's just look at his shita again. Again, this is the Brisa that's found on the top of Tez Zayin, and his shita reads as follows: Rav Yossi v'Rav Shimon omrim la'ochlin tmein la'kelim tahorim. They held that what is the capacity of a liquid to give tuma to others? It's limited, but still present. Yes, it can still make food tameh. So if I have a liquid that's tameh and I pour it and it touches a food, it will make the food tameh. However, the kli that it's in, the cup that it's in, the bowl that it's in will not become tameh. So yes, there is capacity for liquids to give tuma to other items, but food only, not to kalim. So we're going to analyze how Rabbi Yossi got to this shita. And we're going to do that by learning a little bit about who Rabbi Yossi's Rebbe was. We know, of course, the history of Rabbi Yossi's, Rabbi Akiva's Talmidim all dying in the times of Sfiras HaOmer, which is, of course, where many of our restrictions kick into place between Pesach and Shavuos. And one of the new Talmidim, as he was rebuilding, was Rabbi Yossi. So says the Gemara 1/3 of the way down. Where did he get his shita from? Amar Rabba Bar Barchana Amar Reish Lakish Rabbi Yossi b'shitas Rabbi Akiva Rabo Amra. He was quoting from his Rebbe. Now let's be clear. He's not actually quoting from his Rebbe. What he's doing is he's looking at a paradigm, a type of limud that Rabbi Akiva had used for a separate purpose, and he's bringing that cookie cutter over to our world. And it is remarkably similar, and in fact, from the same pasuk. We'll see later today that really Rabbi Akiva, excuse me one second, that really Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yossi don't agree on this drasha. However, again, the templating is the same. How so? Let's see what he says here. Did Darish, Rabbi Akiva saw the word, and I'm just going to add in the vowels here for you because it's not printed in our Gemaras this way. The Darish yitma as yitameh. Sometimes when the Torah says yitma, that something will be tameh, well, that can also be read as yitameh, that it could make other things tameh. Where do we see an application of this? And the idea will crystallize once we see it in real time. Titnan, the Mishnah writes, Bo bayom on that particular day. Look at Rashi, 4 or 5 inches below where we are. Dibur hamaschil bo bayom. What day was it that Rabbi Akiva was giving this drasha? Says Rashi, Dibur hamaschil bo bayom, biyom sheminu es Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah lenesius. We saw this Gemara in Maseches Brachos, that he was taking over as the new leader in yeshiva and the new leader in town. And on that day, back in the Gemara, Ditznan bo bayom, on the day that Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah became in charge, Darash Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva gave the following drasha. V'chol kli cheres asher yipol mehem. I'm going to read the whole pasuk from the side here, because it's very, very helpful to hear the full context. V'chol kli cheres asher yipol mehem el tocho. If you have a kli cheres, an earthenware vessel, and there's something inside the earthenware vessel, and then an animal or something that's tameh enters the airspace from within the opening of that earthenware vessel, then yitma, then kol asher besocho yitma, anything in there is going to become tameh. Look back in the Gemara, v'chol kli cheres asher yipol mehem, anything that goes inside the airspace of that earthenware vessel. So Rabbi Akiva says that anything in there will become tameh. It says yitma in the pasuk. So says the Gemara, eino omer tameh. It doesn't. It could have said tameh, and it would have made perfect sense in the pasuk. I'll read the language as it would have been according to this recommendation. Kol asher besocho tameh. Anything that's inside the earthenware vessel's tameh. But that's not what the pasuk said. What did the pasuk say? Eino omer tameh elo yitma. The pasuk says a word that we should not have anticipated, that yitma, that it will be tameh. Why did you add the letter yud? It should have just said tameh. So therefore, says Rabbi Akiva, yitamei acherim, that it could make other things tameh. Therefore, and here we make a jump to an area that's totally new to us. What's the jump? Limeid al kikar sheni she'ose shlishi bechulin. Now we've learned this already many times, that there are, of course, gradations of tuma. You have an ava tuma. When an ava tuma touches something, it makes it a rishon. When a rishon touches something, it makes it a sheni. Now, normally, when it comes to chulin, here too, just to look at the middle aspect of this sheet here, you see a brief chart that there are dargos of tuma. When it comes to chulin, the maximum we typically say is a sheni. When it comes to truma, there's more kedusha, so therefore there's more tuma. It gets a shlishi l'tuma. The highest level of kedusha is kachim, and therefore it has a revi'i. Now, if you look back in our Gemara, you'll see that Rabbi Akiva is doing something that's very unique and breaks this mold. What does he say? Limeid al kikar sheni she'ose shlishi bechulin. Let's say that you have a piece of bread inside an earthenware vessel, and then in the airspace of that vessel, you bring a sheretz. So what happens? It makes the kli a rishon, and it makes the item inside a sheni. And the pasuk says yitma, that it can make something else tameh too, which means that it will make a shlishi. That's why here there is an asterisk on sheni, that Rabbi Akiva has a mechudishtek idea. He says that even by chulin, we have an idea of a shlishi l'tuma, which doesn't exist within other tanaim. It's a unique shita and one that we don't paskin like. We typically hold of the dargas of tuma as listed here, that by chulin the maximum is sheni. Yet Rabbi Akiva says that based on this pasuk, based on the drush of instead of saying the word tameh, it's yitma, that the bread that's inside the earthenware vessel that became tameh, yitma, it can also cause something else to become tameh. So Rabbi Akiva is a chiddush here who holds that there's a shlishi l'tuma. Now this was just to see the template. This was just to see how Rabbi Yossi's Rebbe used the word yitma. Now let's see how Rabbi Yossi used the word. That was just our paradigm. Here in our sugya about liquids making other things tameh, how does he, Rabbi Yossi, explain himself? So he says as follows. The pasuk reads by us. This is our din. We're talking about liquids making other things tameh. B'chol mashke, any liquid asher yishte b'chol kli tameh, b'chol kli yitma. So it says yitma. Why didn't it say tameh? Same drasha. L'tameh tumas ochlin, to make other things tameh. This was exactly the language, in fact, that the Bryce on Tezayin that we were looking at when we started shir tonight, that's exactly the language that it says. It says, when it comes to tumas ochlin, it's l'tameh tumas ochlin, that it makes food tameh. Namely, liquids have the capacity to make foods tameh. And he says the same thing that his Rebbe does. It could have said tameh, but it says yitameh. And because it says yitame, therefore it says yitma, and we can reread it as yitame, and therefore we see that mashkin, that liquids, have in fact the capacity to give tuma to other items. Ata Omer asks the Gemara, you want to say latame tumas ochlin? You want to say that liquids have the capacity to give tuma to other foods? Okay, but maybe eno ela latame tumas mashkin. Maybe you're wrong, Rabbi Yossi. Maybe what the drasha meant to say is not that food would become tame from liquid, but maybe if a liquid touches another liquid, not food, but another liquid, maybe that's where we would have the tuma. That's what the Gemara recommends here. Maybe you're wrong. Maybe it's not about ochlin, Rabbi Yossi. Maybe the pasuk is indicating that if a liquid touches another liquid, that it makes the liquid tame, and maybe by ochlin there is no tuma. So how do you know which way to learn the pasuk? So says the Gemara in response to that, Amris lo kachaya. That's not how things go. Well, what does that mean? It's like my mother said so. What is this? What does that mean? My lo kachaya. So says the Gemara, a more halachic answer than my modeled idea of mommy said so, because that's certainly not what's happening here. Amar Papa lo matzinu tumash oseka yotzipah. A brilliant idea, a mechudash idea. We'll analyze it later today. But he says, Rav Papa, is that the Torah has no precedent for saying that an item is tameh and that same item can make another item tameh. Namely, you can't have food making other food tameh directly. We know that that's not true. If I have a piece of meat that's tameh and another piece of meat that's tameh and they bump, there are no tuma transfers. We know that that's the case. We know that we need a medium between them of being machshir tumas. It says the Gemara, what does lo kachaya mean? It doesn't mean that it's some random rule. It means that the Torah has to be speaking about liquids being matame a solid, because the Torah can't be matame liquid to liquid, because it doesn't make it tame. So if the two liquids touch one another, it does not necessarily make it tame. And that's why the pasuk can't be speaking about that. It therefore has to be talking about not mashkin. The pasuk speaking about mashkin, therefore it has to be talking about something other than mashkin. So it says Rav Yossi is talking about ochlin, and this is how Rav Yossi gets to his sheet. And now Ravina, we're 2/3 of the way down. Ravina gives a different iteration of this. Ravina Amar nigufe dekra nami lo matzis amris yitma letame tumas mashkin. Not only is Rav Papa's idea true, but you can't even say it even if you wanted to. Even without Rav Papa's idea, we'd be limited for another reason for saying that the pasuk is meant to be that mashkin make other mashkin. That can't be. Why? Not only because of Rav Papa's reason, the pasuk has to be talking about mashkin making ochlin tameh. Why can't it be mashkin making other mashkin tameh? Because the isal kadaitach yitma deseifa l'tameh tumas mashkin. This pasuk has the word yitma in it twice. If the second one is talking about this liquid making another liquid tameh, then yitma dereisha nami litma tumas mashkin. The word yitma in the pasuk, I'll read the whole pasuk, and you'll see this just pops off the page. The pasuk reads, Mikol ha'ochel asher ye'achel, asher yavo alav mayim, yitma, liquid, v'chol mashke, liquid, asher yishte v'chol kli, yitma. So it says the word yitma twice, and the pasuk, if the way that it's using the word yitma, it should be the same thing in the same pasuk, talking about the same idea. So then says the Gemara, had it been the case that each yitma was referencing mashkin, then ne'arvinhu v'nichtavinhu. We should do a consolidation, make them into only one. Ne'arvinhu, we should combine them, v'nichtavinhu, and we should write the pasuk the following way: Mikol ha'ochel asher ye'achel asher yavo alav mayim. And then don't write the word yitma yet, add it later. V'chol mashke asher yishteh v'chol kli yitma. So says Ravina, Rav Papa, you don't even have to get to your halachic concern about the Torah can't make it a mashke tame by a mashke. Forget your rule. Forget that. We have a more basic exegetical problem, which is that the words can't be used that way. The basic pshat in the pasuk doesn't work that way. So therefore, says the Gemara, Trei yitma lamali. Why then, says Ravina, do we have the word yitma twice? Says the Gemara, it must be that the word yitma comes to teach us two different things. Ela yitma dereisha. When it says yitma the first time in the pasuk, and in the context of the pasuk, it is mikol ha'ochel asher yachel asher yavo alav mayim yitma. What does that one mean? That's latame tumas mashkin. Taka. We have a direct drasha, and this does break the rule that Rav Papa mentioned. Ravina didn't hold of the rule of Rav Papa, because he says that the pasuk is exclusively and explicitly telling me that that liquids can make other liquids tame, and yitma de seifa, the yitma at the end of the pasuk, it has to mean something else. That's latame tumas ochlin. So Ravina is a different version, a different understanding of Rav Yossi, and Rav Yossi was of the opinion, according to the first approach, that only ochlin would become tame from a liquid, and Ravina says no, both ochlin and mashkin, liquids and foods, would become tame from mashkin. The ema latame esakelim. So the Gemara says, well, maybe what we should do with that extra word yitma is say that it's to be metame kelim. How do you know? How do you know that the second word yitma was meant to be metame mashkin? Maybe we should hold like Rav Papa, and mashkin can't be metame mashkin, and the extra word yitma should teach us what we already know about Rav Yossi, that kelim can't become tame from liquid. Says the Gemara, the ema latame esakelim. Says the Gemara, we can't say that. Valav kal v'chomer who? Isn't it a kal v'chomer to say that the valav kal v'chomer is the response to the question? I know sometimes in the flow of the Gemara, this would actually be the strength of the question, but the question mark here goes before valav kal v'chomer. So how do we know that the pasuk cannot be referring to kelim? Says the Gemara, we have a kal v'chomer. Umakli, just like a vessel, shemetame mashke ein metame kli, that a vessel, that it can be metame, a liquid, but it may not necessarily contract tuma itself. Mashkin haboin machmas kli enodin shelo yitmu esakelim. If the kli itself doesn't become tame and the liquid becomes tame, so then the liquid inside the kli certainly can't make another kli tame, because it didn't make the kli that it was in tame. So that's why the Gemara says it can't be talking about kelim. Asks the Gemara, well, maybe things are a little different than you're saying about the case of the kli. The ema, maybe ki mitmeu mashkin haboin machmas kli. Maybe what you're saying is true when the tuma of the liquid came about through a kli. But what if the tuma came from a more intense location of purity? What if aval mashkin haboin machmas sheretz? Let's say that it came from the ava tuma of one of the shmona shratzim, the liquid became tame that way. Maybe then we could say that that liquid, because its level of tuma is from a greater source, therefore maybe if it was from a sheretz, maybe we could then say that it would actually make a kli tame. So says the Gemara, no. Mashkin haboyin machmas sheretz miksivi. Do we see a scenario of mashkin haboyin machmas sheretz, that liquids that became tame from this higher level of tuma, from one of the shmona shratzim, do we have a mari makom miksivi? Does the pasuk say anywhere that just because the liquid became tame from a greater tuma, from a sheretz as opposed to a kli, which is obviously different source of tuma, does it therefore mean that the liquid that became tame from the sheretz can make another kli tame? Do you have such a mari makom? Turning to the top of Yud Ches Amud Beis, we'll be learning till about 3/4 of the way down on the page. Says the Gemara, another answer. We have a kal v'chomer here too. Alav kal v'chomer ka'asi. I could give you a kal v'chomer to indicate that a liquid that became tame from a sheretz is different than liquid that becomes tame from a kli. What's the kal v'chomer? Uma mashkin habain machmas kli mitamin. Just like we know that liquids can become tame from a kli, mashkin habayin machmas sheretz lo kol shekain. Then liquids should all the more so be tame. Absolutely. So says the Gemara, and this is a very unique principle. First time in Shas, dayo lavo min hadin liyos kinidon. Enough. Dayo, it's enough, lavo min hadin, to come from the first din, to come from the initial kal v'chomer, the one at the bottom of the page, lios kinidon. This kal v'chomer was taken a little bit too far, and therefore we reject this kal v'chomer, and therefore we don't look at kelim as one of the options, and therefore we now have explained each piece of Rav Yossi's shita. So as we saw in Rav Yossi's shita, he says, as you can see on the screen right here, Rav Yossi v'Rav Shimon omrin le'ochlin tmein. Why do we say le'ochlin tmein? Because of the way we darshan the pasuk. Why do we say le'kelim tahorin? We have to say le'kelim tahorin. It can't be that there's tuma by the kelim, because dayo lavomi nadin velo lios kenidon. Dayo lavomi nadin lios kenidon. The kal v'chomer that you want to say to show me that mashkin that were made tummy by a sheretz are more powerful. We're not going to embrace that kal v'chomer. You've taken it a little bit too far. We'll speak more about kal v'chomers in a little bit. But that should hopefully explain how we got to this opinion that Rav Yossi, Rav Shimon Omer, and that la'ochlin tmein, la'kelim tahorin. We put some good mari makomos to understand the shita of Rav Yossi. Let's continue in the Gemara. The Gemara says, Yitma de Reisha hechi darish. How did Rabbi Akiva learn the word yitma in his pasuk. These two psukim that we've been discussing, remember we mentioned that Rabbi Akiva, he used the word yitma to mean yitame, and that was the template that Rabbi Yossi mimicked to get to our understanding of Rabbi Yossi. But what was actually going on in Rabbi Akiva's pasuk? So let's see. Yitma de Reisha hechi darish. So what is his pasuk that Rabbi Akiva was talking about? The pasuk reads, Mikol ha'ochel asher ye'achel asher yavo alav mayim yitma. From all of the foods that you will eat, asher yavo alav mayim, when there's water there, yitma will become tameh. Yitame, l'tameh esamashkin, that it's able to make other liquids tameh. So I'm just going to show you the full pasuk here because it will help us to understand a little bit about what's going on here. Here's the full pasuk at the bottom of the page. The pasuk reads, Mikol ha'ochel asher ye'achel asher yavo alav mayim yitma. This is the word yitma that we're focusing on now, the one that's in the first box there. This is what Rabbi Akiva is talking about. Let's finish reading the whole pasuk. V'chol mashke asher yishte v'chol kli yitma. So let's look back in the Gemara. The Gemara says, Yitma dereisha hechi nidrash, and then we quoted the pasuk, and then we said that according to Rabbi Akiva, from the first word of yitma, from the first time it says yitma, that's how we know yitame l'tamei esamashkin. That's already different than Rabbi Yossi. They learned differently because Rabbi Akiva learned that a mashke can make other things tameh from one, and at least within Ravina's understanding of Rabbi Yossi, and it was from a different word yitma. So says the Gemara, trying to push on Rabbi Akiva. Let's understand your shita a little bit more. You want to say that it's the tameh as hamashkin, Rabbi Akiva, that the word yitma indicates that a liquid could make another liquid tameh, that the liquid that becomes tameh has the capacity to give its tuma to others. Hold on. Ata omer l'tameh as hamashkin, o eino ela l'tameh as hakli. Maybe Rabbi Akiva, we asked this question against Rabbi Yossi. Let's ask it now against Rabbi Akiva. It's the same question, just on a different person. So why does this word yitma, why are you saying that it's going on mashkin? Maybe this extra word of yitma is going to teach us about something else. Maybe it's to teach us about a kli, that a kli can become tameh. Says the Gemara, Amris kal v'chomer. Rabbi Akiva responds, I'll give you a kal v'chomer as to why that can't be. Uma mashke shemetame ochel einu metame kli. The same kal v'chomer that we saw on the bottom of the page. If the liquid itself doesn't make the kli tameh, ochel she'ein metame ochel, if you have a solid food that doesn't make another solid food, eino din shelo yitma kli, isn't it for sure the case that it won't make a kli into something that's tameh? Hamani mekayim yitma. Well, therefore, what does the pasuk mean, yitma? It must be l'tameh as hamashkin. And Rabbi Akiva says it must therefore be that the word yitma, the first one here on the top line of yitma, must be to teach me about mashkin. And then the Gemara says a very surprising idea, one that I don't know that we would have thought of on our own. But the Gemara says, "L'tamei es hamashkin shein alulin lekabel tuma." Liquids are more susceptible to tuma than solids. That's what the Gemara recommends here. So says the Gemara, I mean, maybe it's possible that they're more susceptible, but it says the Gemara, great question. My irya mashkin mishum da'alulin lekabel tuma. Why is that the reason why Rabbi Akiva is using this? Maybe the reason why Rabbi Akiva is saying that this word is talking about what he said it's talking about mashkin, is because tepukle mishum deleka midi acharina. There's nothing else to make tameh. you said it can't be a kli. We already tended to mashkin. We already tended to ochlin. The only thing left is mashkin to talk about. So therefore, the word yitma has to be talking about mashkin because there's nothing else left to make tameh. You've already either included or excluded everything else. So why did you turn to this lenient that tuma, liquid tuma, is more susceptible than solid tuma? Why? Maybe the word yitma is all that, the only thing that is left to be metame is liquid. So therefore, Rabbi Akiva said that the word yitma on the top of the pasuk, the first half of the pasuk, is referring to mashkin, that a liquid could make a mashkin tameh. Says Gemara Hachi Kamar. Says Rabbi Akiva, the reason we had to say this was because of the following. The chitema, you might have argued that ochel is chomer, food is more strict than metame mashkin, nitmea lekli. We might have thought that food, which is more powerful than liquid because liquid is more susceptible to tuma, ochel is a stronger, it can withstand more, and because it can withstand more, it can also give more. So maybe we would have thought that ochel would be metame akli. Hahu chumra demashkin hu mishum demashkin alulun lekabel tuma. Says Gemara, don't make that error. So the reason why Rabbi Akiva said that liquids are more susceptible was to remind you not to say that a kli can become tameh. Umahu alilasan. Why is it that liquids have more of a susceptibility to tuma? And with this, there is a very a wide berth of discussion in the Rishonim about this. Says the Gemara, Mahi Ali Lasan, what is the reason for the liquid's greater susceptibility? Says the Gemara, Shemekablin Tuma Shelo Behechsher. Normally, when it comes to two foods, two apples sitting on my counter in the kitchen, one of them may well be tamei. But if there's no liquid connecting the two of them, not one of the 7 liquids, the Yad Shach Adam liquids, no tuma will transfer. They could sit on top of each other all day, won't make a difference. However, by liquids, it's different because liquids are already liquids. So says the Gemara, what is the reason for the susceptibility of liquids? Why are they more susceptible to tuma? Shemekablin tuma shelo behechsher. Because they don't need hechsher. Because why? And here's where the Rishonim go off in a variety of ways. According to some Rishonim, they don't need hechsher because they're already a hechsher. They're already a liquid. So if the liquid happens to be one of the Yad Shach Adam, one of the 7 liquids, so we just don't need any extra liquid. That's a chiddush. And there are other Rishonim that say in another direction, but we'll save the time and not go through that. But the point here is to highlight that Rabbi Akiva's shita has now been clarified. His understanding was that the word yitma in the first half of the pasuk is to include mashkin, and this is different than the first approach, both approaches that we saw within Rabbi Yossi. So in short, Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Akiva have different conclusions potentially in regards to what the din would be as to whether or not mashkin can give tuma to others. According to Rabbi Akiva, he says it's true by mashkin and by ochlin and not by kelim. According to our first understanding of Rabbi Yossi, it would only be a solid food that could get tuma from a liquid, but not a liquid food from a liquid. And according to Ravina within Rabbi Yossi, he says that even both similar to Rabbi Akiva. Their learning was different. They got the sources from different places, but the result would have been the same. Let's continue with one more sugya for the night. We're halfway down on Daf Yud Ches Amud Beis. Says the Gemara, we learned from Rav Papa Yitma, when the pasuk says Yitma, what did we learn from there? De'ein ose kayotze ba mehacha nafka. We said that you're not allowed to say that when the pasuk is speaking about mashkin, it can't be talking about making other mashkin tameh. It has to be talking about something else, and therefore it must be talking about solids. Says the Gemara, Rav Papa learned it from the word yitma. Says the Gemara, why did you learn it from there? Me hasam nafka. The idea that you can't say that the mashkin is impacting the mashkin, but rather it has to talk about something different than itself. Mashkin is impacting ochlin. It's not from the word yitma. It's from a different verse. That when there is water on a seed, and then v'nafal minivlas and a sheretz falls onto that, now we have a liquid medium. So then hu tamei ve'ein oseh tuma keyotzeba. So then we said that we learn from there. It has to be a different form of tuma. So why are you saying that the principle that we can't learn from one type to the same type, that we can't do that it's from the word yitma? No, it's not. It's from the pasuk of V'chiyutan. Says the Gemara of Mechudash idea. The Gemara answers this question by saying we need both Mari Makomos. We need to learn twice over that you cannot have a pasuk that speaks about one form of tuma, which will give to that very similar form of tuma. Mashkin cannot give to mashkin. Tuma cannot give, tumas ochlin cannot give to ochlin. So mashkin must therefore give to not mashkin but ochlin. Says the Gemara, we need both Mari Makomos. Why? Chad b'mashkin haboyin machmas sheretz, v'chad b'mashkin haboyin machmas kli. One of them is b'mashkin aboy machmas sheretz. One of them is speaking about liquids that became tamei from a sheretz, a greater level of tuma, because a sheretz is an avatuma. One of the shmona shratzim is an avatuma. V'chad b'mashkin aboy machmas kli. The other came about to its tuma through being in a kli, and then it indirectly got its tuma. So it's a liquid that's still tamei, but a lower level of tuma. V'tzriche, and we need both of them. Why do we need both of them? Says the Gemara. I might have thought that maybe the rules would have been different with a lower level of tuma, because the liquid contracted its tuma from a kli and not from a sheretz. And I might have then treated it differently. However, maybe I would have thought that with the more chamor version of a liquid, with a liquid that became tummy from an avatuma from a sheretz of one of the shmona shratzim, that there we can say that it can give like-minded tuma of ochel to ochel, or mashkin to mashkin. Maybe we could have said that, says the Gemara, therefore we don't say that. But why do we even need to go that far? And just teach me one din. Just teach me the more chamor din. Lishmuina and mashkin abayin machmas sheretz. Teach me the din that when a liquid becomes tameh from a sheretz, that it's not able to give its tuma to its own type, liquid to liquid, solid to solid. Just teach it to me there, and I'll absolutely know that the lighter version, the kol shekin mashkin abayin machmas kli, then I'll know that the lighter version of the liquid that became tameh, not through the avatum of a sheretz, but from another way, then for sure I would know that that can't give tuma from liquid to liquid or from solid to solid. So says the Gemara, your kal v'chomer makes a lot of sense. However, milsa de'asya bekal v'chomer tarach v'kasav lakra. Even though it's true that you were able to come to that on your own, you were able to come to that kal v'chomer on your own with no assistance, still the Torah went out of its way to detail this. How does this work? What's going on here? We know that a kal v'chomer is one of the Yud Gimel Midos she'atorah nidreshes b'hem, that the Torah allows for us to use kal v'chomer to make a svara de'oraisa. But a svara, a logic is always limited. In fact, we have a halacha by Hilchos Malkos, by giving lashes to people, that ein malkin minadin. We don't give malkos from a svara of a kal v'chomer. It must be that you're guilty, because if X is true, then definitely Y is true, malkos. No, we don't do that, because our human intellect is limited. We need the Torah to guide us when we're wrong. It happens to be here that it was correct. It happens to be that the kal v'chomer that was made here is right. And maybe we didn't need the extra pasuk to teach us, v'chiyutan and yitma, to teach me the same din that mashkin cannot be metabe mashkin, and that ochlim cannot. Maybe we don't need it, but the Torah didn't. The kal v'chomer wasn't present at the time of the Torah. A person made this up afterwards, and that's okay. We're allowed to make a kal v'chomer. It's svardik. It could even have dorais implications, but lav dafka that it's always right. So here the Gemara is reminding us that whereas by, let's say, for example, a gzeira shava is a din dorais, you can't even argue with that. A gzeira shava, you can give malkos based on a gzeira shava. Anything you want, absolutely, totally fine. But here, what we're concerned about is that maybe a person might have in our own feeble minds that we made a svara that wasn't totally correct. So therefore, says the Gemara, in this case, we had a pasuk to make sure that we would not get the svara incorrect. We'll stop here. Mir Hashem will pick up tomorrow night with a blot and a half, Daf Yud Tes and Daf Chaf Amud Aleph, and I hope you all have a beautiful night. Thanks so much for joining.